Good morning, everyone. Good morning. My name is Jim Barge. I'm the CFMA Director of Research and Analysis, and I will be serving as the moderator for today's event. And introducing the members of our distinguished panel today, beginning with, on the right of the table, moving to my left. Joining us today in person are Clare Zempel, Principal and Business Economist with Zempel Strategic. Mike Ellis, Managing Partner and Chair, Los Adams Construction Industry Group. Brian Moore, Senior Consultant, CFMA Management Consulting. And joining us by phone today is Morris Siegel, President, SPG Trend Advisors and Advisor to Associated Builders and Contractors Association. And we're really delighted to have at least three of the organizations that participated in our December webcast back joining us again today. Quick overview of our agenda this morning. As some of you may know and you did see, last December we hosted our inaugural Construction Economic Outlook webcast. And our goal today really is to build on that. And today we'll take a look again at the economy in general, where it appears to be headed, the construction economy in particular. Then we'll look to offer some new and or modified guidance as we look at the months ahead. And then last, we'll respond to any questions that you might have in your audience. So, turning now to the members of our panel for their views. Let's begin with the economy and where it's headed. And we'll start with Clare Zempel. Clare?
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. I'm going to focus on what I think until recently has been a contrarian view about the economy and about the financial markets. It's perhaps the case that the consensus is becoming more optimistic, which is the stance, the position that I hold about the economy, that the worst is over, that we're likely to see a rebound in economic growth developing very, very soon now. I want to talk first of all about this depression mindset, though, that had really obsessed the markets and the media, and I think our political leaders, economic policy leaders, in recent months, certainly since September, in some cases long before that. There's a feeling among many people that we are doomed to suffer for an extended period of time. This is in part the Calvinism which runs deep in American society. We've had it so good so long. We're simply destined to be punished at some point, and now is the time. Sometimes there's less logic to these forecasts than you might think, or less scientific logic. There's also noticing superficial similarities between some things that are happening now and things that happened back in the 1930s. For example, housing prices fell in the 1930s, and they're falling now. Therefore, some think we're in for a depression, since the 1930s was a period of depression. In fact, however, housing prices did not cause the depression to occur. They were an outcome of it. When unemployment hit 25% in the 1930s, people couldn't pay their mortgages, even though they were far less leveraged, even though prices had risen far less back then than they have now. But even though you'd think people from Harvard and other supposedly excellent institutions of learning and so forth would know these things, they don't. And that influences policies. Another example of this mindset, mark-to-market accounting, which is maybe a little bit obscure to get into today, wasn't a factor until November 2007. It then became a tremendous force in destroying bank capital in the last 15 or 16 months. And I would talk to people in Washington, if you know that, why don't you change it? The rule didn't exist before November 2007. Why don't you take it away in March of 2008 if it's doing so much damage? And the answer I got was, well, the economy is going to collapse anyway. What difference does it make if we change that rule? It would have made a great deal of difference in heading off the financial crisis. There's an alternate view, which is mine, which is that Lehman Brothers' failure was a shock. We've had shocks to the economy before. This was a particularly severe and nasty one. It shocked financial institutions in September of 2008 and professional investors. Whom would they trust in the future? Whom could they count on to exist for more than 24 hours? Where should they put their money? What was the government going to do? Were they going to be a backstop or not? Tremendous confusion. And then all of us watching the countdown to the votes in the Congress, watching our very visibly shaken leaders from the Federal Reserve, the Congress, Treasury, and so forth, were upset, frightened, scared, panicked by what was going on last September. And so the response was a logical, rational response, a normal human response, paralysis. We're so scared we'll do nothing, we stop buying. And that's what I mean by a shock. Lehman Brothers' failure was a shock that caused that kind of collapse in the economy. If it is a shock, then there should be a predictable sequence to things. And we're at a point in this shock event. We've been shocks before, and I'll show you a few in a minute. They tend to run out of steam, fortunately, after 3 to 6 months. So in the first quarter of this year, we should begin to see sales stabilize. That appears to have happened. In the second quarter of this year, we should start to see sales improve. It's happening to some extent. And then in the third quarter, this summer, just months away, we should begin to see the economy start to grow again. That does not mean that all the damage is behind us. There will still be increases in unemployment. The normal way things operate in the economy, there are things that lag. Non-residential construction will lag. So it doesn't mean that we're free to abandon all concerns about the economy, but I am tremendously relieved because the evidence is developing in line with this shock scenario rather than with this depression mindset. I mentioned that there have been shocks before. Let me call attention to 3 of them. 1974, President Nixon resigned. In 1980, President Carter threatened to impose credit controls. No one knew what that meant. They didn't know if it was illegal, immoral, unpatriotic to borrow. They simply stopped borrowing. Car sales collapsed. Everything collapsed in a short period of time. Just 3 or 4 months later, the president announced, never mind. They never got around to imposing credit controls. But it shocked and stunned the economy into a deep recession, as did Nixon's resignation. Iraq invading Kuwait back in the summer of 1990. People didn't know for sure what would happen, but they knew that higher oil prices, which tended to mean a recession, has happened this time around as well. They stopped buying in anticipation of recession. Instantaneously, the economy, the stock market collapsed. Now we have Lehman Brothers' failure, but in all of these cases of a shock, seemingly coming out of nowhere, it's over in 3 to 6 months, and there tends to be a relatively strong rebound, which again is what I think is starting to happen.